Hi, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar on being prepared. And thanks to everybody who joined us today. Hi, everyone. Uh, I decided this was a really good topic because, just to think about the last year, who would have thought, that some of these things could happen? I mean, for me here in America, and I guess there's some people here from Canada too, so maybe you feel the same way. Like, who would have thought that some of the things that have happened this year could actually have happened? I mean, the whole COVID-19 pandemic thing, the lockdowns, the demonstrations, some of them with rioting and some amount of violence or whatever. So what does the future hold, And I have ideas about, what might happen, what I think will kind of generally happen. I don't have specifics, but I also can look at the possibility that I might be wrong about that. So I don't want to speculate on what exactly, the future is going to hold. But, I can see a couple of different possibilities, several different directions this could go. But all of them indicate that we could get some more, difficult times ahead. And therefore, I think it's really, really important that we think about preparation and what we would do, because here's the difference. If you think about what you're going to do, it's not the same thing as worry. Worry is just rolling over in your mind all the bad things that could happen, but thoughtfully thinking about some of the things that could happen and thinking about what you can do to be prepared to, meet those circumstances is a whole different ball game. So why now? And the whole reason I'm saying this is because, at least here in America, we are more divided than I have ever seen us. In fact, we're probably haven't been this divided as a nation since the time of the Civil War. And it doesn't matter, which side of that divide you are on, or if you are me, you're a little bit more in the middle. You're getting pushed to one side or the other, and because of that great divide, there's a huge potential for civil unrest and for conflict in the country. And that is a very, very important thing to think about. And for the person who just asked about replay, yes, this is being recorded. And yes, I will be posting the recording at stephenhorn.com, as well as you'll get an email with the recording. So considering the fact that there could be a lot of unrest, I felt it imperative to kind of tell people about what I think is some minimal amount of preparation that you ought to have to be able to deal with this. Now, the exact preparations that you would make are really dependent on where you live. Like, for example, if you live way out in the country, well, then that's a different kind of situation than if you're living in one of the major metropolitan areas. And therefore, you have to kind of adjust this all to what you think the needs of you and your family would be. But I'm going to talk about, in general, the two things. So look, think about this, okay? I've heard, some of these people who predicted this first global pandemic talking about there's going to be another one. Gosh, who knows? Who could that? Are there already more lockdowns? Originally, we were told these lockdowns were like 14 days to flatten the curve. Now it seems like they just keep going on and on and on. And as businesses and things are locked down, there's a slowdown of the economy. And of course, that disrupts the flow of goods and services. That's something to think about. I think definitely you're in to see a lot of major protests and potential civil unrest, and some of that potentially escalating to violence, which again, depending on where you live, I think where I live is much lower risk of that happening than in certain other major metropolitan areas. The economy, although it seems to be good right now, is of course very precarious because of the huge amount of debt that the the America is in anyway. The national debt is humongous, and there comes a point at which that turns into a runaway inflation and the collapse of the financial system and a financial reset. And there's a lot of talk about, a global financial reset. So there's something going on, and all of this can go along with the idea of food shortages. And we saw that, even, so there's some people having trouble with reception. Okay, just 1 second. I'm gonna just knock out some stuff here. I closed down most apps before I started, so usually that makes everything work better, but I'll make sure I close down a few more, and hopefully that will get the signal going out better. But we saw something that I'm not used to seeing. We had a lot of very empty supermarket shelves for a little while, and then there's a whole issue: are we going to have compulsory immunizations? I mean, these are all things. Now, when people think about these things, again, most people have a tendency to worry, and worry breeds fear. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? I understand that tendency. I mean, like when you go through something that's uncertain and you're not sure what the future holds, there's a tendency to, be worried or concerned. The problem is that worry is a very unproductive thing to do. Throughout this whole thing, there's some things that have concerned me and some things I don't like, whatever. But I've never been truly afraid. I have a lot of positive about the ultimate outcome of everything, but also it's because I've thought about the possibility of some of these things happening, and because I've also made some preparations. When you take action to prepare or to be able to handle difficult things, then you're less likely to be worried and afraid, and more likely to have confidence that whatever happens, I can handle it. Whatever happens, I'll be able to deal with it. So the first thing about preparation is your attitude. If you tend to have a negative attitude, if you're a person who tends to worry about things, be afraid of things, listen to all of the fear and hype in the media and so forth, is going to have a hard time having a positive attitude. And when you are afraid, your limbic system hijacks your brain, and you kind of react out of this emotional instinct rather than being able to rationally think about your situation. So in any crisis situation, including the things that are going on in the country right now, one of the first things you need to do is take some deep breaths, relax, calm down, and calmly think about what are some things I could do to deal with this? What are some things I could do to handle this? What are some things I could do to prepare for this? And have the attitude, I can get through this, and just tell yourself, whatever happens, I can get through it. Whatever happens, I'll be okay. Whatever happens, I'll deal with it. Just that kind of positive self-talk is going to go a long ways, because if for example, this is just basic survival 101. You get lost in the woods, okay? If you panic, you're in trouble, because you're going to do things that you're not thinking about what you're doing. If you stop, sit down, compose yourself, think about your options, whatever, and make more rational decisions, you're going to be far better off than if you're just reacting out of fear. And when I talk about positive thinking, one thing I need to make clear is positive thinking is not denial. Positive thinking is not thinking, well, there's not going to be any problems, everything's going to be okay. No, positive thinking is not denying the possibility of difficulty or threats in the future. Positive thinking is always the idea that you can anticipate that there are going to be problems in life, but you have the confidence, the positive attitude that you can deal with them. So as you think about the possibilities, then you can decide what you can do if some of these things do happen. Now, I don't also want to caution people, because this is something I see a lot going around on Facebook and other social media platforms. This kind of there are people who kind of this kind of doom and gloom situation. Like if it goes one way, we're all doomed. If it goes the other way, we're all, I don't know. It just, uh, but that's the whole problem, because the contention is so hot. And I know this because when I've tried to just make some, what I thought were some pretty even, middle of the road comments on Facebook, I've seen it erupt into these really angry, pushy disagreements that are just sitting there. And that's just Facebook. That's not, talking about what's really in terms. But I want you to know, first of all, I don't believe this is the end of the world. I actually think we're going to come out through this very well off. And again, I'm not going to talk about that right now. I just want to say, but in the short term, there will be some problems. I'm very, very confident. I would not use the word confident, but I'm quite sure that there's a high probability that there's going to be some problems in the country for a while. So one thing I learned to do a long time ago is that you make peace with the worst possible thing that could happen, and then you plan for the best. Now, one time when I really, really put that into practice was I had been married. My wife left. Then I wound up having gallbladder problems, and I wound up having my gallbladder out. Then my office manager's husband was shot and killed, and her daughter and her daughter's best friend were three of my staff members. And we were planning to move the office the week following this event. And it was like everything seemed to collapse around me. And it looked like, I was doomed. I mean, it looked like I was going to lose everything. Like I was going to go bankrupt. I was going to lose my business. I was going to lose my house. I was going to lose everything. And I thought about that, and I thought, okay, so what would I do if I do go bankrupt and I do lose everything? And I thought about that, came up with a decision as how I would handle that. And then I thought, it probably won't be that bad. So let's try to make it better than that. And I just took it one day at a time and basically tried to improve on my situation. And none of the bad things that I was worrying about happened. But I always have this attitude of trying to make peace with whatever is the worst possible situation. And I would say that the worst case scenario of what's going on right now is a civil war. Hopefully it won't come down to that being that far, but that's a worst case possibility. And if I make peace with that, make some decisions about how I'm going to handle that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to be better. Hopefully it will be much, much better than that, and we won't have that big of a problem. But like I said, the country is very divided. It hasn't been this divided since the days of the Civil War. So what I want to talk about tonight is the two basic things that I think everybody should do. Now, I think everybody should do this irregardless of the situation that's going on right now. I think everybody should do this in general because of a number of reasons. There are natural disasters. There are times when you have, an unexpected economic problem in your family. There are times when, just things go bad. And if you have these basic preparations, you're going to have more peace of mind. Now, the first one is the idea, what would you do if you have to evacuate? Okay? If there's some kind of danger that you have to get out of your house quickly and leave the area, how are you going to handle that? Now, just as the practicality of that, just this summer, my wife and I were up in the mountains hiking. The kids were at home, and we got a call that there was a fire, and we were in a place we really didn't have much cell reception, so it was kind of hard to get the information. So as we started coming down from the mountain, whatever, we were able to call. What we found out is that they had come by, and a brush fire started in our area, and it was moving towards the neighborhood where we live. And so basically the emergency responders, the firefighters and everything, totally evacuated everybody in the area where we lived. They basically said, you got to get out. You got 20 minutes to get out, or maybe it was half hour to get out, and you have to leave the area. And then they also diverted the freeway off of the freeway. So by the time we got back onto the freeway, it took us 2 hours to go 15 miles so we could get off the freeway and head towards where we live, and met up with kids. And fortunately, they were smart enough that they grabbed some of the right things and took them out. And I wasn't really worried because I figured our house is kind of in the middle of the whole division, and maybe it might get to the edge and hurt one or two houses, but I didn't think that they would let it get into the whole area where we live, and wasn't that much to worry about. So there was no damage to the homes, but you have to evacuate. You could have to evacuate because of flood. You could have to evacuate because of natural disaster. So having something that allows you to evacuate quickly, and if you have to evacuate and can't go back immediately, because we wound up being able to go back to our home around 1 o'clock in the morning, but we almost wound up spending the night at somebody else's place until we got the all clear, it was okay to go home. Now, the other possibility, which includes the idea of being prepared, what if we're locked down? What if there's widespread panic and people empty the grocery store shelves? Most people don't realize that grocery stores really only have enough food on the shelves to supply their communities for about a week, maybe 3 or 4 days at the most, really. And so if people panic and they don't have food at home, or they don't have supplies at home, they run to the grocery store and they start just buying stuff like crazy. This has happened in the wake of natural disasters all over the country. In a widespread situation where people are panicking, grocery store shelves could be wiped out in a matter of hours. Do you have enough food and enough basic supplies to get by for a couple of weeks until order is maintained, until order is restored? I know some years back I was on the East Coast after Hurricane Sandy, teaching a class near that area, and somebody came in and they had not had power for 2 weeks, and it was hard to get gas for their car, and it was hard to get supplies. So you really should be prepared to take care of yourself and your family for about 2 to 4 weeks without power, without being able to go to the grocery store, without having to rely on, quote unquote, the system to take care of your needs. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is those two things. These are things I think everybody should do. And I think, considering the unrest in the country, it's better to do it now, because if you don't do it now, when things are relatively peaceful, then when there's something bad happens, like I said, the grocery store shelves get emptied, or something happens really quick, and then you don't have time to prepare. So it's better to be prepared and be able to handle this. So let's start out with the emergency evacuation plan and a bug out bag. One of the things that was a weakness of the situation with our family is you should have, if there is if there's some kind of emergency, you should have a place where you've agreed to meet. Because what if the cell phones go down or something like that? And so that if you're separate and something happens like that, where are you going to get together with your family? You should decide that in advance. And then you want to get what's called a bug out bag. A bug out bag allows you to grab your bug out bag and also grab your important papers and everything really quickly. And then you can quickly leave and have a few basic supplies to take care of yourself for a couple of days till things get to back normal and you can. I mean, an example of this is people in California who might have to evacuate their home because of fire, just like we did. I mean, this is a really important thing to think about. Now, there's priorities in this, and most people have the wrong priorities when they think about preparation. Most people think first about food. But really, there's quite a few things that are even more important than food. You can live for quite a long time without food. You might be hungry, but you could live for a while, at least a week. Okay, The biggest problem is clothing and shelter. What if you are, have to evacuate and it's wintertime where you live, or it's blazing hot in the summer like it is here? You have to think about the weather conditions where you are and plan appropriately to have something to shelter yourself from the elements. The fastest way to die in any emergency is of hypothermia or hyperthermia. In other words, being exposed, what's called exposure to the elements. Water. You need water long before you need food. You also want to make sure you have your some cash, your documents and essential medications, something for light, fire, and communications, some ready-to-eat food, first aid and personal hygiene supplies, and then maybe some tools. And we're going to talk about each one of these. So let's start with clothing and shelter. Okay, so obviously the clothing and shelter supplies need to be appropriate for where you live. Are you going to have to possibly shelter from heavy rains? Is it cold? Is it snowy? Whatever. And so you need to plan accordingly if you have to bug out in, when the weather is difficult. At the very least, you should have something to help keep you warm, such as a sleeping bag or a wool blanket. Now, the advantages of a wool blanket is this. Wool will keep you warm even if it gets wet. So that's important. And you could also get an optional rescue blanket, which is not like an insulated thing, but it has a reflective surface that basically reflects heat, can be used as an emergency tarp on the ground, or help to make an emergency shelter, or wrapped around you in an emergency to help warm you up. I also recommend having a tent or even just a tarp, one of these tarps that you can buy at any hardware store, and you get a little bit of rope that will fit through, small enough to fit through the little grommets in the tarp, and you could use the tarp to pitch a shelter. Now, all you have to do is run a rope between two trees or two objects, throw the tarp over the top of it, lay part of the tarp under the ground, and weigh down the corners with some rocks, and you have a little instant shelter from the elements. You have a nice wool blanket. You've got something to shelter you and keep you warm. You can also just throw it on the ground to have underneath you. And one other thing to think about, especially with the whole COVID thing, but it's important anyway, is have a bandana or a dust mask or some other thing that you put over your face in case there's a lot of particulate matter in the air, such as smoke from a fire or that kind of thing. I mean, that's another good consideration. Now, water is the next consideration. So you want to have some water. You can get prepackaged water, or you just get a nice water bottle, preferably one that is made of metal, so it is more durable, and you make sure to have some water in it. And what I do is I put a little of the Aquasul silver into the water to help keep it good. And then so if you've got a container to hold water, you can put the water in the container, and then you need some way to purify water. Now, you need more water if you live like me in a desert, okay? If you live in a place where there's a lot of water around, streams, lakes, whatever, you can get water from, then you mostly need water purification tablets or so forth. You can get a hiking water filter, which is something like this. I have one of these. You basically stick it into the stream or pond, put the other thing on top of your bottle, and you pump it. And it pumps it through a 5-micron filter and basically allows you to make the water drinkable. You can also buy water purification tablets. You can use the silver, which is nice to have in your first aid kit too, so that's good. You can also use unscented chlorine bleach, 6 to 8 drops per gallon. You use more if the water is cloudy. By the way, that's true of any water purification thing. If the water is cloudy, it's a little bit muddy, you need to put more water purification, double the amount of water purification treatment you put into it, and try to let a little of it settle before you drink it. In an emergency, if the power is down, I mean, just we had a really, really violent storm. Probably 4 to 6 weeks ago, and it knocked down one of the power lines, and we were out of power for probably about 8-12 hours. If the power went down for a longer period of time, like it did with Hurricane Sandy on the East Coast, your ATMs aren't going to work. You can't take your debit card to a store and buy something if the internet's disconnected or the power's down. So you need some cash. So you always want to have some cash so you can pick up some supplies if you need to on the way or whatever. And you should also have all your important documents like your passports, titles to your car or home or whatever in a safe place where they're all together, and put them in a plastic bag, and then you can grab those and stick them in your bug out kit when you have to leave. And another thing is, if you're on essential medications, like you're on a high blood pressure medication or diabetic medication or something like that, you should have those also in easy reach to throw into your bug out bag, because you're going to need to have those too for people in an emergency. Make sure you have a flashlight and some extra batteries. What's nice is you can actually get solar charging flashlights, or little things that have a wind-up generator in them as well as solar panels. So you can either wind it up to charge up the batteries, or put it in the sun to charge up the batteries, and it will have a built-in flashlight. And it'll also have a built-in radio, so you can listen to the radio and pick up communications in an emergency, which is really important to know what's going on. Now, that's a more expensive option. If you don't have a lot of money, you don't need to do that. Just make sure you have a flashlight. Also have some way to start a fire. And I would recommend having at least two, some matches, a lighter, or there are little, metal matches or other fire starters. If you know how to use them, get one and do that. And also they have solar or wind-up cell phone chargers. And since cell phones today are kind of important for emergencies and communication, if the power's down, how are you going to recharge your cell phone? Well, either a solar pack or a wind-up cell phone charger would be handy. Now, those are a little more advanced items, but they're nice to think about. Okay. Now, for food. In a bug out bag, you don't want food you have to cook. You don't want food you have to rehydrate. You want food you just eat. Okay? So energy bars or hard candies that normally we aren't going to eat candy, a lot of us who are, into health or whatever, but having a few hard candies, to suck on something and give you a little quick energy is okay in an emergency. Some trail mix with dried fruits and nuts, crackers, some dried cereal of some kind, or pretzels, some kind of dried hard carbohydrate, because carbohydrates are something that you really want in that kind of emergency situation, something that will give you quick energy that you can eat on the run, that's not too difficult to digest. You can also get the little small packs of nut butter, peanut butter, almond butter, etc., and have that, eat it with the crackers or whatever. And if you do want some protein, the best way to get the protein is they have those little pouches of now that aren't cans, they're little pouches that you can get like tuna in or that sort of thing. Those are really handy. By the way, this is all kind of stuff I like to take hiking, as quick, easy things to eat in hiking. But whatever you're putting in the bug out bag, don't put in something that you wouldn't normally eat. The reason why is because anything that you store, you need to rotate. So my stuff that I keep for this kind of thing is stuff I use for hiking. So I rotate it. I could take it out, go use it hiking and replace it. And I always have some stuff on hand for the emergency bug out thing. Also consider a first aid kit. I actually don't like to go hiking or anywhere without having at least a few bandages, something to disinfect a wound, some gauze pads, something for pain, and for emergencies, something for shock, like rescue remedy, distress remedy, FES five flower remedy or something like that, because a lot of people go into shock in a difficult time, and that's a really handy thing to have. Also, a little bit of toilet paper or some tissues. You get a little, those little packages of tissues that you get for blowing your nose. Those work well for both blowing your nose and for toilet paper, which you can shove one of those in your bug out bag, a little maybe tube or a little something of some liquid soap that you can use to wash your hands. If you're in an area where it's really sunny and a lot of sun, you might want to pack some sunscreen. If you're in an area with a lot of bugs, you might want to pack some insect repellent in there. Now, also you want to consider some tools. Now, I have a picture here. This is actual bug out bag. In fact, I'm going to show it to you here in a second. I would definitely have a pocket knife. I would definitely have a multi-tool. A multi-tool is one of these little tools that has a screwdriver or a little wrench, so you could fix some things, and some duct tape. I wouldn't take a whole roll of duct tape, but what you could do is take a piece of a pencil or something like that and roll some duct tape around it, so you have a little miniature roll of duct tape. Duct tape comes in handy for taping something that tears or whatever, and some plastic bags. Now, I put things inside of the plastic bags, but that means that you have some plastic bags to work with, and you might even get a big plastic trash bag. You can actually make a rain poncho out of a big plastic trash bag by cutting a hole for your head and cutting 2 holes for your arms and pulling it over the top of you, and you've got an instant raincoat, as well as trash bags come in handy pretty well. Other things that you could consider are a whistle, a mirror to signal with, a gun if you're concerned about safety, where you're going, a small shovel or a hatchet, if you need to chop wood. I mean, all of that depends on where you are and what kinds of things you need. Now, I'm going to temporarily stop the slide presentation, so I have, okay, so I made these bug out bags for my cars. And I made them a number of years ago, and they sit in the back of the cars. And so, wherever I am, like if I was at work and something happened and, I had to get home, and I couldn't, my car wasn't running, I could grab this and go. Or if I had to leave the house, I could go up to the car and get it. So that's why I keep it in the car, because it's like handy, for that. And I have some of the things I talked about in here. So see, this is one of these rescue blankets that is coated with foil. It is really light. I have in here a wool. There's supposed to be a wool blanket in this one. It looks like the kids took it out. Guys, I've been needing to go through these because some of this stuff is actually gets used. Okay, they pull out the tarp or they pull out the whatever. I have in here some, when I did this, I did it with some military rations, which I have here. And I also have down here, oops, where'd they go? Looks like, so my son's pulled some things out of here, but there were water packs in here. Oh, there they are. See, this is actually, I did this because this is handy. These are little emergency drinking water pouches that I just got, and so you just cut them open and get a drink of water. And I also have these. This is a wind-up cell phone charger and a flashlight. So it works as a flashlight. You can charge the battery by winding it up, and then probably needs to be wound up because it's been in here for a while. But you actually see there, flashlight starting to go. Plus, you could also wind it up and use it to charge a cell phone. It has a port here for charging the cell phone in it. And in the very front, I have, there's actually a folding shovel in this one. And I also keep cash in these. There's a little teeny pouch right here, kind of a hidden pouch. And inside of this is an envelope that has, some emergency money. So that's how I do the bug out kit. So pretty straightforward. So come back to the presentation and go to the next part. So the next thing that's a priority. Now, obviously, this is handy because it does give you some food. It gives you, you've got your flashlight. You've got your little tools and things you need in here. For staying at home, you want a little more food and water, and maybe some additional supplies. A little heavier amount of supplies. I kind of like this picture because it's got gluten-free, and a bunch of different things that are like, there you got organic rice, Bragg's apple cider vinegar. It was a nice picture. So again, water is high priority, especially where I live. Water is a high priority because I live in a desert. So if the water went off, we'd be in a problem because the nearest water is quite a hike from where we live. So you want at least 3 gallons of water for each family member. I bought these blue water containers. I filled them up with just chlorinated tap water because I'm not going to be picky in an emergency. And I put, I believe it was 2 tablespoons of the silver in each one of them to help keep the water good. And then I've just stored these. And I have enough to have water for everybody in the family for actually about 3 or 4 days, about a gallon a day. You also are going to have water purification supplies, which should be in your bug out kit, so that you can also purify more water if you need to. Now, when you're storing food for emergencies, I really do think you should always have, like I said, a 2 to 4 week supply of food on hand. But for that particular kind of food storage, don't store anything that you do not eat regularly. Now, the cheapest things to have for food storage are dried grains like rice and millet and corn and that kind of thing, beans, pasta, cereals like oatmeal, that sort of thing. But don't store those things if you don't eat them because you have to rotate them. You can also store canned goods if you eat canned goods. But again, you have to rotate them. I would not rely on frozen foods for your emergency food storage. It's okay if you have frozen food on hand, but if the power goes out, you're going to have to eat the frozen food first. Unless you have a way to, keep power on in your house, you're going to have to eat the frozen food first. So you need to think of things that you can eat that are growing. Now, it doesn't matter if you are eating these things regularly, as long as you're being able to rotate through them at least once a year, you're going to be fine. And you also want to think about the fact that what if the electricity is off or the gas is off, or however you have a stove powered, how are you going to cook any of this stuff? That's a really important thing to think about. Now, I happen to live out of town on an acre of ground. It wouldn't be too hard for me to build a fire in the backyard. I've got wood, but I also have a little stove that you can cook on with wood, and I also have a camp stove, a propane camp stove. And you also, if you have a backyard barbecue grill, with a propane tank, as long as you've got propane tank, there's something else you could cook on. So think about what you'd cook on if power is out. Now, the way I always have like 3 bottles of mayonnaise, 3 bottles of ketchup, several containers of oil, all of these basic staple supplies. I always have multiple units of them, and I put them on the pantry shelf so that they're lined up with each other. And when I get a new one, I take it off the front, and then I put it on my shopping list. I go buy a replacement and I shove it to the back So the new one gets put at the back, so they're always being rotated. So I'm always getting the oldest jar of mayonnaise first, and the newest jars of mayonnaise are going to the back, or whether it's peanut butter or tuna fish or can something, it's always rotating like that. And one of the ways I do that is I watch, for when something's on sale. So when something's on sale, I'll buy, several cans of beans or whatever and put them on the shelf. And then, so I always have a stock of some of these foods that you can rotate through. And that's the smart way to do it. Not to go out and buy a bunch of, freeze-dried emergency foods and stuff like that. Just buy stuff that you eat and stock it and rotate it. So you always have a supply of stuff that you could eat if you, weren't able to go to the store. I have one of these little heating units right here that has propane tanks on it, little miniature propane tanks. I have a bunch of the little miniature propane tanks. And the reason why I got it is because some years ago, the power line went down and it got really cold in the house. It went down in the wintertime. And so I went out and bought this so that if the power goes out, I can at least put a little heater in one room. And if we all have to sleep in that one room or whatever, at least it'll help stay warm. And so when the power went out this last time, I pulled this thing out. And we had a nice little space heater that lasted for as long as the power was out. If you live in a really, really cold climate, you want to do something like that. If you have a wood stove or something like that, that's great. If you don't, you need something that you can run safely inside the house, because you can't, it's not safe to have an open flame running inside the house to try to heat the house. But you want to have something that will heat the house. If you can't get something like this, just make sure you have extra blankets or some sleeping bags or something like that to keep you warm, and also some emergency lighting. So lit a bunch of candles. I have an old-fashioned oil lamp. Only problem is that I didn't realize the wick was almost gone, and so we actually ran out of wick while we had the emergency. So I had to order some more wick to have on hand for the future to run my little oil lamp. I have a couple of little bottles of the kerosene oil that go in it, but it's really nice because it gives out pretty good light. But some emergency lighting is a really nice thing to have, for that. And also want to think about emergency sanitation. If for some reason, the water shuts off and you can't, flush your toilet, how are you going to go to the bathroom? One way to solve that is you can get a porta potty, and you get one of these little lids that basically turns it into a little miniature toilet. And what you do is when you go in it, you basically get some dirt or shredded newspapers or wood ashes or anything like that, dump it on top of it and put it somewhere. And, you learn from the COVID-19 thing, having a little extra toilet paper is always nice. I like to buy toilet paper and paper towels and stuff in bulk at Costco, and always, again, be rotating through it. So I always have a good supply on hand, and a little bit of soap or something to disinfect and keep things clean, because sanitation in an emergency is really, really important. For me, I would probably, because I live on an acre, we'd just go dig a hole in the backyard and just put up a tarp around it or something. One other thing that's good to have in an emergency is to have, again, some cash. I've been getting silver. One of the reasons why I've got silver is because the price of silver is very low right now. It's a lot easier to get a hold of than gold. It's likely to go up in value or hold its value for a while. So if there's a problem with the financial system, having some silver coins could make it something to barter with. But, a lot of times, if you think about it, if there's some really difficult times that happen, there are some other good things that you can barter with, like salt is a good thing. People will need salt. People will need sugar. Even if you don't eat refined sugar, having some refined sugar in storage is always nice, because you can barter it with a neighbor for something else. People who are coffee addicts might, need coffee. People who smoke cigarettes might need tobacco. Chocolate and candy. Ammunition is a good bartering tool. Extra food is a good bartering tool. But if you have to, hey, go over to the neighbors and say, I've got some of this, can I get some of that? That's a really nice thing to do, because what you want to do is think in terms of community. Not one of the things I don't like, and I've never liked, is the idea of the, building the doomsday bunker, and somehow you're going to keep everybody else at bay, and you're going to have your little thing. It won't work like that. The only way people really can handle emergencies is if you work together. If you get together and you pool your resources, pool your talents, pool your abilities, and work with other people in the community. So that's a very important aspect of being prepared, is to make sure that you have friends and family, and you're able to work well with other people. Now, this tonight was kind of like what I would consider Emergency Preparedness 101, the basics, the minimum anybody should do to be prepared. And I again seriously indicate that we're in a very dangerous situation in our country with the contention, the division, everything else like that. So I think it's very important that you be prepared, that if there's a lockdown, if there's martial law, if there's civil unrest and you have to leave your home or something like that, you've made a little thoughtful preparations and you can handle that. And even if none of that happens, then you're also, at that point, you're prepared that if there's a natural disaster, there's a fire, there's a flood, there's a hurricane, there's a tornado, or anything like that, you're able to respond to it better than people who haven't prepared. So I'm going to be doing 3 more webinars on this, going into more detail about more advanced things you could do to be prepared. Talk a little bit more about, as some of this unfolds, I'll talk a little bit more about what some of the likely scenarios might be as things continue to unfold. But I'm going to start off on January 5th with being prepared physically for emergencies, going into more detail about more advanced concepts in food storage and emergency preparedness for physical thing. On February 9th, I'm going to talk about the mental, emotional, spiritual preparation for handling crisis times and being able to deal with them in an effective way where you're not a burden to other people, but you're actually helpful. And then on March 9th, I'm going to talk about skills, skills that you can have that will enable you to be of use and value to other people and handle yourself if there's other difficulty. Oops, that should say 49. You can, if you're a member of my member program, these will be included in the member program. If you're not, you can sign up for all 3 classes for $49. You'll also be able to purchase each individual class as well. And then also I've decided I really want to teach people about herbalism in the way that I really originally started out with, which is being prepared to be of service to people in an emergency or in difficult times. So I'm going to basically doing a whole series of classes for the member program, which also will be available if people aren't members to purchase, on single herbs. So I'm going to basically go and talk about single herbs, and I'm going to talk about the field botany aspect of it, identifying edible and medicinal wild plants, being able to identify them, but also how to use them, which includes being able to use them, with buying commercial preparations as well. And we'll show photos of them, talk about identifying characteristics, talk about the energetics of these plants and plant families, which is kind of how helps you read the book of nature. If you have to go out and start, foraging for stuff, how to kind of think about this energetically, how to harvest stuff, how to prepare them and use them. And so that will be part of my upcoming member program. So I'm going to be doing more training on this because I really think this is a very important time to do this. And with that, we come to the question and answer period. And most of the comments I've had so far have been about issues with, hearing or anything. Nobody's actually had any questions, but anybody who would like to ask a question right now can feel free to ask a question. I'll stop the slide presentation and go back to here and pull up the chat, and nobody's asking any questions. Yeah, my bug out bag does contain herbal remedies. The reason I thought this one, because it was in the other car, would probably not be as tampered with, but apparently they actually got into it and used some stuff. And I really need to go through them all and put them back together, because they've used Band-Aids and stuff like that. I actually I have some things like some peppermint oil in here. Normally I keep a little bit of I have some tea tree oil in here. I normally have some silver gel in these things. I don't in these kits keep anything other than just basic first aid supplies. I have actually bigger first aid kits, and I've done and my advanced physical preparation will include more details for a larger scale first aid kit, but I do store quite a few remedies, and I have done presentations on those. You want to have something for pain. You want to have something for fighting colds and flu. You want to pick some basic remedies that are going to enable you to get things, taking care of things. Oh, someone says they have the British Berkeley water purifier. That is really wonderful. I've seen those. Those are really nice. So someone mentioned that they have a generator, which helps you with power backup. I actually wish I had a generator. Since we're in the country, we have a propane tank. And the nice thing about the propane tank is if the power goes off, we still have our propane stove. It would be lovely to have a propane generator that could kick in when the power goes out, but I haven't been able to afford that. Plan for pets. That was one of the things that my wife was a little upset with. The boys actually were smart. I was really pleased with the boys. They took the dogs, and they took the miniature safe with all the documents and some other things. So they really evacuated, I thought, in a very thoughtful manner. They didn't grab the cat, but the cat's hard to find. But it's a good idea to, if you've got pets, to plan for what you're going to do to take care of them too, if you have to bug out. I've stored my water with the silver in it for about 5 years, and I'm seriously considering emptying it out and refilling it. It's probably because the water was chlorinated when it went in, so it was clean water, and I put the silver in it to preserve it. It's probably just, it's probably still good. It probably has absorbed a little bit of the plastic stuff, but in an emergency, I wouldn't worry about it. I would actually literally, when I took it out of the container, I would probably aerate it to kind of improve the taste and add a little more silver to it before you drank it, or else boil it. Yeah, if you've got a generator and you can stop up on gas, that's good. Oh yeah, well, I don't know that the kids knew that there was money in the bag, but I don't think they watched this anyway. No, but also I say I actually made bigger bags with full-sized backpacks for my kids who live in California, and I gave them to them as Christmas presents a few years back. I gave them bug out bags, and they had and they were equipped with all this stuff and some more. They had the food supply, the water. I gave them the emergency cash, everything. Probably spent about $250 on each bag, but they appreciated it. It was a nice present. So, but I told them you should have a plan of where to meet in case of emergency. But I think it's a really good idea to have a bug out bag. I I think it's an important thing. The power source for my little indoor heater is propane. It actually can be hooked to a big propane tank, but there's these smaller containers of propane, and I just bought a whole bunch of them. So I have about a dozen of them. It's enough to heat the house for, several days in case of an emergency. If longer term, there'd be a little more of a problem, but at least for the short run in a quick emergency, there's something there. We also have a fire pit in our backyard, and we have a propane fireplace, but it doesn't put out that much heat, so it wouldn't be that useful in an emergency. Mostly what we'd have to do is if it was out for longer than that, we'd have to rely on bundling up with warm clothes and sleeping with extra blankets. On a budget, make a list, someone said, and buy 3 items a month. I did this for years to be prepared for storms, and it worked out great. That's exactly what I'm saying, is if you think about this, you don't have to go like hog wild. If you go to the store and you buy things that you normally buy, look for them on sale. Instead of buying 1, buy 2 or 3. And then you can go back to buying 1 to replace the one that you use. And so you can gradually get a supply to where you have multiple items of every of every basic thing that you normally are eating that's storable, okay, so that you could do this. And one thing I learned about, I mentioned ketchup and mayonnaise and stuff like that, is because I actually have lived off of my food storage a couple of times when there was a difficult situation. I really believe in being self-reliant. And I found, since I have a lot of things like grains and beans and stuff in my long-term storage, that stuff is really boring unless you have something to help flavor it. So I also have a variety of herbs and spices and things like that I keep at the house always, so that you can flavor that stuff. And I also bought, for long-term storage, I bought some freeze-dried onions and other things like that you could throw in with beans or grains or whatever, cook them, make them more palatable. Someone says, if possible, have extra vehicle fluids, a serpentine belt, and spare keys. Yeah, obviously people who are think about preparedness like me plan ahead to be prepared to handle emergencies. They try to think ahead of what would happen if I couldn't rely on the system and I had to take care of myself for a while. At least having a jump start to be able to help you get going in whatever you needed to do is going to give you a lot more peace of mind. It's going to make you more thoughtful. But one of the problems is sometimes people, they see all these things, and when there's a big list of things, they don't do anything because it seems too overwhelming. They want to wait until they have enough money to do everything. Don't do that. Just start with some simple things. Gather together what you already have to make a little bug out bag. I mean, I got these bags at a conference, so they didn't even cost me that much money. And, so, and then I just put these together. So I'd have these kits, and I just feel really good about them. I also know, if there was some kind of a emergency, that they're in both vehicles. And see, there's the twine, but they've taken the tarp out of here, and the blanket's been taken out of here. So I got to go find the blanket and put it back in here. Anyway, I didn't want to take the other one out of my car, because it's buried under a bunch of stuff. Okay, if you want to sign up to be a member, you can go to stephenhorn.com and do sign up, or call our toll-free number. Our number is 800-416-2887. And you can sign up for, I've just posted it there in the chat room. You can call if you want to get on our regular billing. It's $19.95 a month, and we just bill you about around the 15th day of every month for the next month. So someone else has been, grown up in a thing where stockpile for emergency. I grew up in the city, but my parents always had food storage and were prepared for emergencies. And so I just have lived that way my whole life. And I just feel like it's an important thing to do. And I don't want to, someone asked me what I think about what's going to happen with the election. I don't want to get into that right now. I'd rather wait. I don't want to start into the controversy and everything, because that's the whole point. It's such a hot thing that it's hard to talk rationally about with anybody. Even in my own family, I have a hard time, sometimes speaking rationally about it, because people say blah 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 blah, and I go, well, no, it's like this or whatever. And so depending on what news sources you're tuning into, you might have different ideas. But again, my big point in all of this is, whoever is declared the winner, whoever is winds up being president, half the country is going to be ticked off, or at least a large percentage of the country is going to be ticked off, and likely to have protests, and those protests could turn into more conflict, and and so I think it's wise to have a little preparation so that you could handle that. I haven't thought much about the pets, but I know we always have plenty of food on hand for the pets because we stock that, but I haven't thought too much about the bug out situation with the pets. So I need to give that some thought. But we buy pet food and rotate pet food too. So there's always a supply of pet food in our house for the dogs and cats for a while. And person said, I think, what is a good concluding remark? We have to remember God is in control, be faithful to him, and he will take care of you. That's the big reason why I don't worry about these kinds of things, because I have a tremendous amount of faith in God, and whatever happens, I have trust in God, and that God has purpose in my life, and I know that I'm not going to get out of this life alive anyway. If you've made peace with God and you're not afraid of death, or not afraid of the situations that are going to come, it's a lot easier to be prepared. And a lot of the preparation I have done is not for me. I actually have prepared mostly in the idea that if something bad happened, how would I be in a situation where I don't have to worry about myself, and I can go out and help the people who are going to be panicking, stressed, having problems, maybe don't have any food, etc. And how would I be able to be of help for them? So I would encourage you to think in terms of that, not just how are you going to be prepared for yourself, but how will you be of service to your neighbors, your friends, etc. in the event of an emergency or problems happening. How can you help others? Because if you're focused on helping others, that also will make you less panicked, help you be more able to get spiritual direction, and get through whatever happens. God bless everyone. Thank you for tuning in tonight, and appreciate you, and hope to see some of you on the other webinars very soon.